The Honest Money podcast is brought to you by Prescient Investment Management. We consider everything to give you the advantage. It's the future of investing. Prescient Investment Management is an authorized FSP.
Welcome to Honest Money. I'm really excited today to talk about the new kind of format for the show. And the big change is, as you can see, or if you're listening, as you'll hear very shortly, I'm joined by my co-host. Welcome, Pieter.
Thank you so much, Warren. Yeah, it's very much an honor to be here today, and I'm looking forward to engaging in interesting financial topics that I think should be accessible to everyone, every single South African.
So for Pieter, for people that don't know you, maybe just give us a little bit of background. I know why I've got you on the show, but they need to hear from you as well.
Yeah, for sure, Warren. So just a very quick rundown. I'm a veterinarian by profession, but I switched careers to become a financial planner. I also run a YouTube channel called Money Marx, which I kind of started back in the day when I was a vet, where I realized my financial knowledge was not where it should be, and I had to learn a lot of things by myself. And in the process of learning, I started teaching it online to help others, and that evolved to the point where I was able to switch careers completely to become a financial planner and to take people that further step. But most of my time is spent on providing financial education that I think we all should know about.
When we can all use as well. Yeah.
Yes, yeah, for sure.
So and maybe just for everyone listening and watching, I mean, from my perspective, that the way that you've done the content is really the reason you're sitting here. I think that certainly it's easy for anyone to start a channel and speak nonsense. It's very hard to start a channel and speak sense in a way that listeners can understand and viewers can appreciate. So that's why we've got Pieter on the show, and I'm thrilled that you're here.
Thank you so much.
So now we've got all the fuzzy stuff out the way. We're talking about offshore investing today, and I think off air we were saying it's a huge topic, and we can cover lots of aspects of offshore investing in many episodes. But I think maybe just to kick off, why should they invest overseas? What's the reason?
Yeah, I think there's a couple of things that comes to mind. Firstly, I just think it opens up a whole world of opportunities. Big players, your Apples, your Teslas, your Microsofts, those big tech giants that we all know about, the Magnificent Seven, those guys shooting the lights out with AI. We don't have access to those type of caliber of companies within our small little world of South Africa. Last time I checked, all the companies in South Africa, total market cap is less than 1% of the entire world. So just by default, if we invest offshore, we already get exposure to, I'd say, about 99% of markets that has the potential to really grow and excel. And second main reason I think is just for diversification, for the currency risk in South Africa. We're all aware of the rand that unfortunately has a certain trend that it followed since the past 30 years. I think devalues about 4 to 6% a year. So in global terms, if we consider ourselves, our wealth in global terms compared to the dollar, that's 4 to 6% per year that we're potentially losing if we don't have exposure to offshore companies. And also we'll talk a bit later how to invest offshore, but I think those are the two main ones that I would consider.
Yeah, and I think it's important when you're an investor, you're not sitting in South Africa and making a one-way call to say, I'm investing overseas because I think the country here is just going south and there are no opportunities. It's much more a case of saying, diversification is a core fundamental of investment principles. So you need to be in countries and economies that have a totally different dynamic to your own.
Yes.
And one of the things I like is, when you're investing globally, you're looking at, for example, a country, let's just say almost like the whole of Asia, where you've got very highly educated population, works incredibly hard, and yes, innovation is becoming a bigger factor in their lives. So they're starting to catch up to the US, for example, from a research and innovation point of view. And then you've got this very good demographic profile where you've got young people entering the workforce and working incredibly hard. And equally, in a very mature economy like Japan, where the population is much older, but very well-run businesses and with a totally different dynamic. So I always think, at the moment, the flavor of the month is the Magnificent Seven. Yeah. And certainly that it's a beautiful exposure to something that will not saying never see in South Africa, but we don't have today. But having said that, if you want to buy Ferrari, I'm not saying the car, but the share, you can't buy that in South Africa. You have to get it else. So I think that, but also their bond markets and their money markets work very different. And agreed, like the diversification principle is possibly rule number one. And if you think the future is in biotechnology and anti-aging and all of that stuff, maybe you're right. But sure as heck, you can't buy that stuff in South Africa. You're going to have to buy that in Switzerland or maybe the US. I mean, maybe let's just, you kind of raised something a bit earlier that I really want to talk about is how we do this. And before we do that, I have to ask you the question. So is this for the lotto winners? Is this for the multimillionaires only? Like if you're not loaded, don't do this.
Yeah, I guess it used to be like that back in the day. And maybe you'll know better, but when you had to have a lot of cash to convert to dollars and you had to go through a specific route to invest offshore. But now with technology and many innovative platforms, every South African can invest offshore. There are two main ways that we'll get to into now, but it's not for the rich, it's not for the wealthy. Every single South African can get started with. Some platforms will allow you to start with 10 Rand, 15 Rand, 50 Rand. It's really accessible. I think investing has been democratized to most people, and even in the offshore space as well, which is a good thing.
Yeah, and I think that's maybe the key here is if you've got a small amount every month, you might start by saying, okay, I'm not going to necessarily go and send that money directly overseas, pay the foreign exchange conversion costs, etc. What you can do is you can buy a South African unit trust, a South African exchange traded fund, and get that global exposure. Because I mean, the fact that it's a South African ETF or a South African unit trust doesn't mean that those are all only in South Africa. Yeah. They've got names like Feeder Fund, or if you see worldwide or global, it's what it says on the box. That's do your research, but your exposure can be very global with just rands. Yeah. And I think that is important. I would say for larger sums of money, then going through the pain, and it is pain of dealing with SARS and sending out your money through big, the kind of big tax clearance process is worthwhile. But definitely, I agree with you. This is for everybody. Maybe before we get into the how, we should maybe just talk about how much. Because I think that for me, people always feel in investment world it's binary. You've got 100% South Africa or 100% global, and I always think that's not right. There should be a blend. So I'm going to jump in. I'm going to give my rules, and then you can disagree or add to. So I feel when you're planning to live in South Africa and saying, knowing what I know today, this is home, this is where I'm going to be for life. You should always have an exposure with some of your money to rands, because you're going to spend in rands, you are going to earn interest in rands, and interest in South Africa is much higher than pretty much most other stable countries. So earning interest, having some exposure to the JSE makes sense. And when you're spending money, especially once you stop working, you don't really want to be in a position where your income that you're earning from investment suddenly halves or doubles because of an exchange rate. You want a bit of stability. Yeah. So I would say maybe there are kind of three broad categories, and everyone will be different and everyone will tweak it somewhat. But I think if you end up in South Africa and you reach financial freedom with just enough money, then somewhere around 25 to 50% of your assets should be overseas. And I'm not talking about the money you've got in a house or something like that. I'm talking about investment assets. If you're going to hit financial freedom and you've got enough money to leave behind to one generation, then maybe that number goes 50% to 75% at the most. I think at the most, because 75% is a big number. Yeah. And then I think if you know that you're super wealthy, you've got money that's going to go to your children's children, and you don't even have kids yet, then I think that the number goes to 75% of assets. That's a difference. So now, for the first time, we're adding in the value of properties, things you don't consider to be investment assets. And again, this is not a call on South Africa and the future of the country, because the truth is, you and I are sitting here, we don't have a clue what's going to happen to South Africa over a decade. But your time frame when you're investing for 2 or 3 generations is so far that diversification becomes the thing.
Yeah, I agree. And I guess like an easy benchmark to look at what the medium person would need look at Regulation 28 of the Pension Funds Act, that kind of governs retirement annuities, pension funds, they increased the offshore exposure now to 45%. I guess that's to mitigate the risk to have a balanced approach. Most people assuming will retire in South Africa. So I also kind of use that as a starting point. And then, as you mentioned, the more wealth you have, the more you can start thinking about going over. And I guess if you are someone that's feeling strongly to immigrate in the next 5 to 10 years, then it's also a good idea to start building up that offshore port. Or maybe if you travel a lot, just having a bit of dollars or pounds in a wallet is also a good idea, but not investment wise, mostly for short term kind of cash spending.
Yeah, and I think that immigration point's power. I mean, I think that's really important. People are, and I think just to be careful there, if you're saying maybe one day I might immigrate, but there's no plan, that's not.
Yeah, it's not a plan.
That's not a plan. Then carry on as you are here, but building up your overseas exposure as part of your portfolio.
Yes.
But if you're saying, I've got 3 years to go, I'm definitely going, then I feel you throw those recommendations out the window and you really start building up your overseas exposure and reducing your South African exposure, because you are going to be spending in dollars, pounds, whatever it's going to be, whatever your global currency will be, and then build up those assets there. Because I think equally you don't want to arrive in your new home and then your assets have dropped by 20% because you only converted your currency 2 days before you left. I think start converting as you. So that's a great point.
Yeah, and there's no prediction to know when the rand will be stronger or weaker. There's so many factors that plays a role. So for people that wants to start, maybe converting rands to dollars, what would your general kind of recommendation would be? Like just every month put over a little bit, or to save big amounts and then exchange it?
Yeah, so we've got to do two things here. We've got to be careful of getting nailed by the banks on transaction charges, and then getting hurt on big currency moves. So I think, for example, if you're in that position where you're going to send a large lump sum, then maybe break that up. When you, well, we have to get into a little bit of detail. But so when you apply to SARS to say I want to send a large amount, you can do up to 10 million rand per 12-month period. You've got to go through a tax clearance process. So don't do this if you haven't done your taxes. They're going to say no. If your tax affairs are in order, you can do 10 million rand per 12 months. That means that you could do, let's just say it's 10 million rand. You could do 3.3 million rand right now. Then maybe you wait 3 months, do another 3.3, wait another 3 months, do the last 3. So I would phase that out over time. Equally, if you've got a small amount, then you don't want to do that phasing, because maybe the transaction charges are so high that it eats away your money that you've sent out. So then you just do it, I think. When you've got the money, you so I think be careful about currency conversion, because on the other side, when the money arrives wherever you've invested, if your transaction charges are low, for example, to buy, let's say you've got dollars and now you're converting dollars into a dollar ETF or a dollar unit trust. If those transactions are low, those costs, then phasing that in on the other side makes a lot more sense. So I would phase out lump sums. Otherwise, just do monthly if you're doing a local debit order into a global fund. But small amounts that you're physically going to convert into dollars, just do it, I think, as you get them.
Yeah. And then before that 10 million, you also have that 1 million single discretionary allowance that you can, without Sasha's approval, you can switch over. So this also includes going over maybe to America to spend some money. But once you exceed that, you pass that 1 million, then you have to go through that onerous process. But in that, if you reach that stage, you've got good problems. So then it's better to work with a professional to help you with that. Just because it's a multimodal process, and it depends also who you work with, and fees becomes very important, especially because the banks, as you mentioned, they charge flat fees, and that becomes diluted the bigger amounts you kind of switch over. So it's more of a complex thing. So on that note, let's maybe take a step back and just say like the two ways that we can invest offshore. Starting with the most easiest one for all South Africans, we call it the rand denominated funds. Can you maybe explain a bit how that would work if Pieter wants to invest, say, 1,000 rand into the offshore market? How would it be the best way to do that?
So what's very nice about our investment markets in South Africa, the whole product market, is that they created these in the old days, they used to be called feeder funds or asset swap funds. So you can invest rands, you can buy a global equity unit trust or a global world index exchange traded fund. So what it does is it's giving you exposure. Let's just say for the world index, you're getting the total world stock market, but it's priced in rands. So you're effectively getting the benefit or the downside, depending on what happens with exchange rate. You're locking in your exchange rate. So you put your 1,000 Rand in. Let's just say that today, as you do that investment, the Rand is 18 to the dollar. You've now locked in your exchange rate, and then you've bought the world markets, because that gets done for you by the product provider. And then you benefit from whatever the world markets are doing. If they're going up or down, you're going to get that benefit. You're also getting the benefit of the exchange rate. If it continues to go down by 6% a year, your investment will actually grow in value. If the exchange rate goes from 18 to 15, that's going to hurt you. And it will be pricing all the time. So you'll actually see the value of that priced in Rand. When you decide to access your money again one day, it's important to know you're not getting that paid into your Channel Islands or your Swiss bank account. It's getting paid into your South African bank account in Rands.
Yeah.
So that's I think the best and easiest way for monthly amounts, because you can do a debit order into or smaller amounts.
Yeah, and that's one great way to mitigate against the potential Rand weakening. It could also strengthen, we never know. But what that also means that if the Rand weakens and your companies that you invest in grows in value, you kind of get a double return. That also has the flip side of capital gains taxes becoming a problem. But there's a way to mitigate that as well. It's just using tax-efficient funds, a tax-free savings account, retirement annuity, that at least takes care of that thing. But if it's in a normal, just investable, taxable investment account, then I guess capital gains tax could become a bit of a...
Look, death and taxes, right? We're going to pay taxes. If you have money, you're going to pay tax somewhere.
Yes.
I love the idea of paying capital gains tax versus income tax.
Yes, yeah.
So I think that's what people are so fixated on avoiding tax that they end up buying either phenomenally expensive products, like they buy these wrappers overseas that... these overseas pension products or whatever, and they lose sight of the fact that they've put money into something which costs them 4% a year, and they go, great, I'm saving tax. Yeah. Well, if you don't want to pay tax, buy something that's going to lose value. That's also a way to save tax. To me, I want to pay capital gains tax because it means it's almost like a performance fee. I've paid because of growth, profit. So yes, I don't love paying tax, but I'd rather do that than income tax.
Yeah. And asset allocation is always the most important thing. Tax efficiency is important, and cost as well, but the assets you invest in is going to build wealth. And if that means you pay more taxes, it means you're doing something right. Trying to mitigate taxes as far as we can through what we have available. There are different ways, but that is the main focus, I think.
So let's just stay on tax for a second, because there's one thing that I think people get, the kind of big picture that they lose is when you invest your money. So you and I talk about Apple shares, or we talk about NVIDIA, like it's the flavor of the moment. And yes, now it's possible for you to buy that NVIDIA share, and it's very exciting. Great, I'm going to buy my NVIDIA share, goes up 1,000%, and now I'm $1 millionaire. What you've done is you've bought a share in America, and you're not a resident in America, you're a resident in South Africa. So if you are unlucky enough to die just after you've made your $1 million, and your estate will now have to pay tax at a rate of 40% on the gain above whatever your cost price was, on your profits. 40%. Now that's a tax I really want to avoid.
Yeah.
In South Africa, estate duty, what is it, 20%?
20 to 25.
20 to 25. We think we pay a lot of tax here. Pay 40% of your gains.
Yeah.
So I think there, just to know that when you invest in American shares, I think it's over $60,000. Was it?
Yeah.
$60,000. If you've got profits of more than $60,000, you're going to pay death duty of 40% as a non-resident. There's no way to avoid it. If you think SARS is tough, try and deal with American tax authority.
Yeah.
Much worse. So anyone who's punting you a share in America, great, find out about the tax. And equally, for example, if you invest in the UK, I think it's £325,000. Okay, that's a lot of money.
Yeah. But
still, be careful. There are places like Switzerland, Ireland, Luxembourg, Channel Islands, where they don't tax non-residents. So that for me would be, we're talking about now domiciles, a bit of jargon, but where your investment lives is key, not just where you live.
No.
And I think people really lose sight of that.
Yeah, I think it's kind of, if you go through the school of investment knowledge, that's probably like matric. It's a bit of a more deeper level of understanding, but it is very important because many people, they kind of get caught up in the offshore hype and they want now NVIDIA because they saw that going up and now they want Tesla. which every person kind of goes through a phase. Important that once you exceed that $60,000, which is, I don't know, R1 million, let's say, or then that CITES tax, they call it in the US, that 18 to 40% table gets applied. So yes, you don't want to be in a position where you've built a lot of wealth and your family depends on that. You pass away and then the IRS from America comes and take their share, and Alsace, there's some tax credits, but in any case, you could potentially wipe out 40% of your wealth just by taxes, which would be very unnecessary. So focusing on usually like buying individual shares is very much a discussion on its own. But if you want to play the more safe game, buying Irish domiciled ETFs or unit trusts, those are mostly available on most of the big platforms. And then all of your estate stuff is sorted out. You don't have to stress about that because that becomes quite complex. A couple of extra layers once you go over.
And very often in the name of that investment, at the end, it will say something like a UCITS, UCITS.
Yes.
And if it says that, you're pretty much sure you're okay. It's domiciled in the right place.
Yeah.
I'm looking at our time, and I think we're pretty much over time. Any other last points you want to leave for the listeners and the viewers?
I think the main point we want to get across is it's important to diversify your money offshore. It's also important not to kind of become too obsessed about that and just to go 100% into offshore just because you've heard something on the news. It's all about the principle behind it is diversification, to have access to bigger markets and to mitigate some of the risks we currently face. But it's all part of a balanced approach to investing and investing for the long term, making sure it's in the right vehicles with the tax considerations that comes along with it.
I actually almost have nothing to add. I think that was a great summary. Just remind people again the name of your YouTube channel.
It's Money Marx.
Money Marx. Thank you very much for listening and for watching. If you are, we'll be back again soon.
The Honest Money podcast is brought to you by Prescient Investment Management. We consider everything to give you the advantage. It's the future of investing. Prescient Investment Management is an authorized FSP.